This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not an offer or solicitation of an offer to buy or sell securities. SNN Network, SNN Inc., and the Planet MicroCap Podcast and the representatives are not licensed brokers, broker-dealers, market makers, investment bankers, investment advisors, analysts, or underwriters. We do not recommend any companies discussed. We may buy and sell securities in any company mentioned and may profit in the event those securities rise in value. We recommend you consult with a professional investment advisor, broker, or legal counsel before purchasing or selling any securities referenced in this podcast. Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft. Thank you all so much for the support and for tuning in. Do me a quick favor. If you like what you hear at Planet MicroCap, please take 2 seconds and give us 5 stars on Spotify or Apple. This helps with the search engine so that more folks can also discover and engage with all things microcap stocks. Also, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter on Substack. It's microcapnewsletter.substack.com. You will be notified of every piece of content that we put out there from Planet MicroCap, as well as the due diligence series, as well as our weekly index updates. So microcapnewsletter.substack.com. Now, up next, we have the Planet MicroCap Showcase Vegas happening April 30th through May 2nd, 2024 at the Paris Hotel and Casino. We just announced our first keynote and speaker, Andrew Walker, host of the Yet Another Value podcast, will be back to host a keynote Q&A with legendary small and microcap investor, Bob Robotti. This is a conversation you will definitely want to see in person. Our event brings together the best investors and thought leaders in microcap, quality microcap investing opportunities, and above all else, the most fun and highest return on your time that you could ask for. There's more announcements to come, but registration is open. If you'd like to register or participate, please visit planetmicrocapshowcase.com. See you in Vegas. Now, my guest on the show today is Sam Namiri, partner and portfolio manager at Ridgewood Investments. Today's conversation is Sam and I catching up on the year that was in 2023 and the year ahead in 2024. He's a frequent guest on the show and was one of my first friends when I started in this business all the way back in 2011. I always enjoy hearing his perspective on the microcap markets, as he's one of the hardest working investors I know. Sam turns over every rock, will take as many meetings as possible, and works tirelessly to find that next great microcap stock. Thank you again for tuning in to the Planet MicroCap Podcast, and please enjoy my interview with Sam Namiri. Sam, good to see you, man. Happy New Year.
Likewise. Happy New Year, Bobby.
All
to you and your fam.
Thank you. To you and yours as well. Look at us, dude. We're back. It's 2024. And, look, I mean, we made it, like we can start there. We made it.
We've survived. Are we back to like normal yet, or post COVID?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I feel like we should go to every hotel and ask them. I think they would probably say, "Oh yeah, for sure." But then why is my cost of everything up? 20%. It's like, oh, dude, just don't worry about it. Don't worry about that. It's fine. Yeah. But, you're one of my favorite guests to have on the show, to just jam on microcaps, just jam on the sector, just everything going on. So I figured I'd start off, we're still, relatively early in 2024. We could still talk about the year that was. So, 2023, how was it for you? What did you see? Your initial takes, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I would say 2023 was the year of the big caps, especially the biggest caps, right? And so, you look at the NASDAQ returns, you look at S&P returns, NASDAQ did great. And the S&P did amazing as well. I mean, not as good, but, in the 20, I think it was mid 20% returns. Those did well. And most of it was from, a handful of names, 5 or 6 different investments that, did amazingly well. So really it was the year of big cap, and it was not the year of microcap. That's for sure.
The Magnificent Seven just held up everything.
Yeah. And especially, I noticed in, September, October, November, not really much December. Let's say probably like mid-December, it reverted, but there was a lot of, it seemed like tax loss selling during that time period. And it seems to be happening a little bit earlier and earlier every single year. And so that, in hindsight, that would have been a great opportunity to get into a lot of microcaps, because, the last 2-3 weeks of the year, things turned around. But wow, that stuff is so hard to time. Like, who knows how that's going to work out? The Fed says something different in their last meeting, and things may keep going down further. So, that's why I think at the end of the day, a lot of people in the microcap space are, stock pickers. We're not macro forecasters, so. 100%. Anyway, I mean that's what I'd say the story was like, liquidity or illiquidity really hurt the microcap space. People were pushing, getting out. And I think, when it comes to like outside money, foreign money, like the US is the safest place to put capital. And again, it doesn't rush towards microcaps. People aren't thinking microcaps are the safest place to put your money. So I think, at some point that spread has to balance out, I believe. And so that's why I think 2024 hopefully could be a great year for microcaps where that does happen. Because when you look at the metrics, price to earning multiples, EV to EBITDA multiples, things of that sort, when you look across the different indexes, it's hard to get information on microcaps, but at least on the small cap versus large cap scale or spread, those are at historically high spreads where, the Russell 2000 looks very cheap compared to the S&P when you look over a historic period of time. Like that, the spread of the multiple is very, very wide right now.
I was going to say, I just got an article for the next issue of Planet MicroCap Review from Chris Satterthwaite from Verdad Advisors, and I was like, what are the metrics that are pointing towards why 2024 might be an interesting? Maybe I shouldn't give that away. That's in the magazine. Like, you should wait till the magazine comes out. So I'll tell you. I'll just say that Sam is pretty much on the money.
That was a sneak peek.
I'll say that. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, look, Sam, you're somebody that does arguably more, not just one-on-ones, because you do a ton of one-on-ones at my conference, but also management calls. I mean, if you're going to be in the microcap space, you better be doing. I mean, not better. I'd take that back. I would, but yeah. I know that you do as part of your due diligence process. What was kind of the tenor in some of your conversations with management teams? Because some of them, I'm sure they're out of excuses, right? Like, I think we did a couple pods last year talking about how most CEOs, like, you can't talk about, COVID or, because that's more or less done, or supply chain. That's more or less been figured out. So now 2023 was kind of the year, 2024 as well, where it's like, okay, put up or shut up, let's go. So was that kind of the nature of some of your conversations this year?
You always hear excuses.
No doubt. Those are the two main ones.
That never stops.
That was probably the 60% of it.
I mean, first, let's start off with like the broader point of like, talking to management teams. I do it, but I know some people who absolutely never do it. And the reason is they don't want to get biased, right? And start thinking a certain way. And so I get that. And I think at the end of the day, like, you want to know the truth, right? And so you're talking to these management teams and you don't know if what they're telling you is the truth, but like, you triangulate it, right? That's at least the goal. And also, like, you do, like, you have the gut test as well too, to say, hey, like, does this make sense what they're saying? Things of that sort. But like, I would say in microcap space, I still do talk to companies that are still running through issues from COVID. For instance, like, they may have purchased way too much inventory, and that demand hasn't come back to where it was during that time period, or they purchased too much inventory because they were having delays in their supply chain. Like, the supply chain delays aren't really there anymore. Again, there are a few sectors, like there's certain like chips that are still hard to get. Or some companies went out of business, so like the prices are still going higher because, again, there's no supply for a certain component. Like, if you had gone from if you have a component that had 3 suppliers and now it's down to 2, and then let's say one of them, their factory's down, like, they're going to have a problem. So you still run into that, but that happened before COVID as well too, so that isn't too different. I would say the other thing is, the infrastructure bill. I think I mentioned it, at your last conference. The infrastructure bill, it's starting to like kick in and get into effect. So I think there are some companies I've talked to that are excited about that, and the effects of that going forward. And I think, in general, a lot of my conversation in 23 was how much of an effect regulations have had, on their businesses, whether positive or negative. Again, I consider infrastructure bill, a regulation in a way. But like, fast food workers now in California, it's minimum wage $20, right? That's going to have an effect on that. It's going to have an effect in other ways too, like, robotics, right? Like now the ROI on, investing in a capital project to bring in some automation in a restaurant, the math pencils out easier for that to actually happen. So, that's going to benefit, can you find the right companies where that benefits? I know there's a company, I don't think they're public, but like Flippy has been in the news, right? Where it like, it cooks, cooks like burgers, or it does like fries, or like certain other, applications that are, kind of dangerous as well because the oil flies around. But anyway, so like that type of stuff, I think will help. I think more recently in the news, I saw, Biden is looking to pass a regulation against gig workers where it like classifies them differently. So that, again, like forget about Uber and Lyft drivers, but like think about the ancillary businesses, like whether you're like renting a car to them or insurance to those drivers, right? Like how does that change, right? And so like a ruling like that can make so many effects on so many different businesses, where like it's hard to tell, right? And so that's where I think there's opportunity in the microcap space, but also there's risk as well too, right? So like a business model can completely fall apart based off of a ruling like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I've been hearing, and what kind of goes through my mind currently right now. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, how can we turn over the most rocks? How can we find something that is undiscovered or is priced just incorrectly, right? Sometimes things are discovered, but human emotion moves people from one way to another. I think that's kind of like how I've seen or heard of what's going on in the world, going into 2024.
Absolutely. Another question I have to ask, because listen, I feel like we've grown up a little bit together in this space. We've been going to conferences together I started 13 years ago now. I think maybe you were a few years ahead of me. Right. Only a few, because we're both 25 at this point. But in terms, speaking on regulation, just kind of looking at just the, this is a topic that I talked about, I think, with Cromwell a little bit, and also just, talking in our daily, talking to everybody in microcaps, has to do with supply, and a lot of companies, there's been a little bit of M&A specifically in Canadian microcaps. That's been happening a lot. We did an interview with Matthew Martin talking about that, and now you're starting to see a lot of these companies on NASDAQ doing reverse. That's always been the norm, right? So in order to stay on NASDAQ, they do these reverse splits, whatever. But it seems like it's been happening a lot more frequently, I think, especially in the latter half of last year, and some of these companies, probably voluntarily go into the QB or the QX, or just delist altogether. Maybe not necessarily go private, but just delist because they don't want to deal with the public market costs and all that good stuff. So I'd love to hear your take there. Have you been starting to uncover new names, or have you been looking now mostly at names that you've known maybe 5 years ago that maybe are just looking a lot cheaper than they did?
Yeah, to be honest, like it's more like happenstance, like what I end up looking at. I look at both. I have like watch lists and things of that sort that are constantly being added and removed. And it's like, sometimes things get removed and, someone brings it up to me, when we're chatting about names, or I see it like in the news, or I see something and you're like, hey, you see a news article and you're like, okay, well, does this company, like, let me go look at how this company's done or what valuation it's at. This does make sense. So, I'd say it's a mixture of both, in that aspect. I'd say one of my own personal biases right now that I'm trying to go through is, a lot of things were quite cheap at the beginning of December, and it's gone up now. And it's like, well, just because it's gone up some degree, like, should that stop me from buying it, right? And the other aspect is, what should I sell now as well too? So like sell discipline, I think, is probably one of the hardest things, because like you hear stories of, companies that go up, 15, 20, 100x, whatever it is, right? And it's like you have to suffer through some drawdowns typically to get there. And so there's this whole never sell mentality, right? Oh, you find this great business, you never sell. But like, there's probably more companies where, they go up and they come down and they never go back up again. Right. And so like, it's a balance of like understanding, hey, like which businesses are these ones that have everything working for them, especially in the long term that'll work out regardless. And then which ones are the ones that, there's a price you should sell it at. And when you get that price, like you should be comfortable selling it. If it goes higher, that's great. But, you sold it at, a reasonable price. So I think, that's probably like where, I'm constantly thinking about right now, less about like, is it old names or a new name? Again, it's easier to get comfortable with an old name because you've done a lot of the work. And like what spurred that to me was like, there are some newer names that I've been looking at and they ran up on me. And so like, I'm like, do I keep doing the work to get more comfortable with it at this higher price? Or is it worth it for me to move on to the next one? And so, yeah, I kind of have a mixture of both when it comes down to it. So
no, that's a fair point. And dude, it's so funny that you saw. I mean, most of us who pay attention, like this last December, a month and a half to close out the year. You're right. It was an interesting. I guess I don't want to say phenomenon because anything can happen in any year, right? Like it's not. It's just it goes against what we're normally used to, where it's just December is just usually a terrible month for microcaps, for tax loss. Well, just getting rid of your losers in general, but usually it's microcaps, and just kind of doing the tax loss because when we did the year end pod with Paul and Jason and oh my gosh and Maj. That was one of the things that we were talking about too, is just like, hey, there's been a ton of momentum in the last few weeks here. So that's pretty interesting that, if you weren't paying attention, oh shoot, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it just felt like people just did their tax loss selling earlier.
Yeah.
And then it was like that once that was done, like no one wanted to be the last one, doing the tax loss selling. So I guess once that was done, it was like, oh, Fed said something positive. Let's go.
I was like, oh, everyone's on vacation. We don't have to worry about this. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Like, we don't have to think about this right now. Well, another question I have for you is because I know you're a generalist. I know you don't focus specifically on one sector in small microcaps at all. But what would you say are some interesting takeaways from various sectors that you were looking at or that you ended up taking a position in a couple companies or one company in 2023, and maybe your thoughts on that going into 2024. Remember, we don't have to go into individual names, just your own sector takes.
Sure. I think there's opportunities in like financials, like the banking sector. I think I think a lot of the smaller, I say small, but like small cap and up banks, after the whole Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, and was it First Republic, after those issues, right? Like they were all cheap. Like the whole banking sector was cheap, but the small cap and bigger banks seem to have rebounded some degree, and I don't see that as much in the microcap banks. So like that, I think has an opportunity. Again, like it's hard to find good banks with like good CEOs and stuff. And good capital allocators there and that have good underwriting, because at the end of the day, that's what's important for banks is cheap cost of capital, right? Can they get good deposits? And then also, do they lend, right? Like conservatively, in good, and have like a good value where if the loan goes bad, right? Like they have protection there. So like, that's really what it comes down to. And so one of my bigger investments is in a bank and is in a microcap bank. It's a pretty niche bank as well that came out with pretty solid results this year. Again, what becomes tough is at the end of last year, again, if you're like a somewhat conservative CEO, if you give guidance, right, you're not going to give like, unattainable guidance. So unfortunately that hurts the stock, because then like if there's any analysts covering it or just in general, like when they give the guidance, people are like, oh man, I was expecting your old guidance and now you're changing it, or I was expecting some growth and now you're saying there's going to be like a little bit of growth and not a lot of growth, right? And so the particular name I'm in, that's what happened to it. So it didn't like get the benefit of maybe the bounce back that these other banks have gotten. So but yeah, I mean, like, again, when the Fed goes and says interest rates, we plan on having a few cuts next year, that works. That's good for banks and, a lot of other businesses as well too. So I get why the market ripped towards the end of the year after that announcement.
Bring on the speculation, baby.
Yeah,
It's all coming back.
and I think just also
I don't know that for sure.
Also like kind of going back to like you talked about, these companies like doing reverse splits to stay on NASDAQ, things of that sort. What's really exciting and what's kind of shifted over the last, I'd say before COVID, like the decade before, there were less and less public companies, right? It just kept shrinking, acquisitions, going private, things of that sort. And, COVID changed that because, the stock market was ripping, companies were getting ridiculous valuations. So everyone went public, right? Everyone SPAC'd, did all this stuff. And so now, you see the remains of that, which is exciting. And I think that's what, as a microcap space, like a lot of these companies maybe were small caps and now are microcaps. And so it's like, hey, like, is there anything valuable there that we can, pick at, really, like the slim pickings at the end of the day, what's left over. So, I think that's what's super exciting. And again, I think from the peak, I think 2022 is probably the peak, and now we're going to start shrinking again in terms of, I think we have been shrinking in terms of, how many public companies there are, and especially the smaller ones as well too. I think those will be, that's more volatile, I'd say, in terms of number of companies. But again, like, I mean, international, there's great opportunity. The one thing that I think hasn't been talked about, I think it's been about a year and a half, maybe like a year and a half or so, is the dark microcaps, right? Like now it's much more difficult to trade them because you have to be in this expert market. I haven't really played around with it much, but I think there is probably some good opportunities there. Again, very risky because they don't file, right? So like you don't know like what actually, like you have to make huge assumptions as to what, their financials look like. But I think, again, there's an opportunity for companies, I'm assuming there's opportunity there to do stuff. Because again, like I trade through Interactive Brokers. And if a company stops filing or some issue happens with them, they go onto the expert market and I can only sell the stock, right? So when you're in a position where you can only sell something, right, that usually gives excessive downward momentum where it goes, you would think too far in that other direction. So the problem is that you need to get off that expert market at some point. So that's really the catalyst. So that would be more like a event driven strategy or an investment, right? And so I think that I haven't heard much about that, since that went into.
Yeah, I honestly, I hadn't. I mean, I talked to Cromwell about it a little bit on our pod, but I think my take was that the main perspective was that obviously they want to either, all these dark companies, either QB, QX, pink, even, or just stay dark, right? And I think they're really trying to de-incentivize people to even participate in those. I'm curious. I should talk to Dan Shum again and have him on. I'm curious as to what his him and also I should bring that up. But you also brought up the point about some of these like quote unquote fallen angels too right now, and I actually have been having a lot more conversations with those types of companies, like well-known brand name type companies that are now sub 300 million market cap. I'm not saying they're not the smallest of the small, but still sub 300 million market cap that are now looking around in our neck of the woods because they recognize that we want to go and talk to an audience like yours or just be in front of as many small microcap investors because you guys tend to have more of a long-term focus, and that's where we want to build out our shareholder base again, rather than folks that are the bigger institution will talk to them anyway right now, right?
Yeah.
And also they don't want to be amongst the short-termism, that type of crowd. So that's been pretty interesting.
So like one company that stands out, and I can talk about it because it's not public anymore, is Blue Apron. So I met with Blue Apron. Yep. It was August or so, and like literally, most people know about Blue Apron.
I was trying to get them on the due diligence. So I talked to their IR guy. Like it was a couple months back and forth where we were gonna do it. Because I mean, obviously everybody and their mother knows the Blue Apron story. Like they basically started the meal service, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But anyways, I cut you off. Go.
So like I met with them and I was like, wow, like your market cap is like, I think they were like 40 or 50 million or so. And so it was like, wow, but again, they had a lot of debt, um, things of that sort. So and they were still losing money at the time, but private equity I think a private equity firm came and bought them like about a month after I met them, at a pretty decent premium versus the price it was at then. So, they were making some changes. They were cutting costs. They brought in new executives, that seem to be doing at least with the right things. But yeah, I mean, like, I think there are more opportunities like that out there. I think, and again, that one, like the risk reward, because they had so much debt, like the risk was, they could go into bankruptcy, obviously. But like, I think there are good opportunities out there because some of these companies, they raised so much cash, right, during when they went public that, they still have, if you can get a clear path to like break even, right? It's like some of them maybe even trading less than cash. So I think that's, I think it's important there to like actually do the due diligence, meet with the management teams, understand their plans, and get a sense of, hey, does this make sense? Like, is this achievable or not? Right. And again, like, I think me and Maj were talking about it when we chatted at some point. It's like those companies that go from losing money to making money, like that inflection point in their stock price is huge, right? Because now you're bringing in all these new investors who are like, they see the light to some degree, right? And it's harder to see the light when you're like, burning cash. So, if you could find those and, I think
Yeah,
and time it, I think it's finding it and timing it, right? That's a great opportunity.
totally. And you know what? Good brands don't grow on trees. If it's if it's a brand that maybe it's for a product that I don't even use, but I know the brand, that I mean, I'm not to use it so personally anecdotally, but that means probably other people that don't use the product also know the brand. And there's some value there. Even
Yeah.
maybe it's just they have to fix things operationally or they have a new plan in place, everything that you just said. So that's actually been pretty interesting to me. What else? I mean, anything else having to do with 2023 that we missed that was interesting to you that you saw, that funny conversation, or I don't know, and anything having to wrap on 2023?
Let's
Maybe
see.
funny, maybe,
One of my favorite conferences. I thought your conference was really good in
thanks,
Vegas.
man. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I thought the quality of companies was solid. The number of companies was great, and so that was and the people there, like just chatting with other investors and other companies and other IR guys and stuff like that in the field.
We're right on track for 2024 as well, man.
Nice.
We're pretty pumped. Which, by the way, Planet MicroCap Showcase Vegas, April 30th through May 2nd, 2024. I'm like the most annoying plug person of all time. Sorry, Sam. Continue.
But let's make it even better.
Yeah,
like just keep going in that direction.
Try, man.
I don't know, like what did we miss from 2023? I don't know. I think we pretty much hit it. Hopefully 2024 treats the microcap market a little bit better. Hopefully, people find the opportunity or they see, what the momentum that's starting to go up, it keeps kind of going up. And, at the end of the day, it's going to be earnings is going to drive things, right? So it's like, what direction does earnings go? Right. I mean, you would hope so. Earnings and multiple, right? That's really the two ways to make money or to grow your valuation. So, hopefully things go well there. I hope that, the other thing that not many people have talked about is like, when a company needs to refinance, if they have some debt, right? Like, what does that look like to a company and how does that hurt it? That's going to be interesting. I think there's some tax changes. I think, some of the tax rules that were changed when Trump was president, some of those are starting to fall off. So, that may affect some companies. I mean, it will affect some companies. So like depreciation, like there was some bonus depreciation that used to be able to take 100% off in terms of taxes. Now, I think it's starting to like step down where it's not 100%. I can't remember if it's like 80% or 60% right now. So I think that'll affect some like, bigger purchase decisions from companies on the margins. So I think, like if you're, I love looking at macro stuff and then seeing where the micro gets affected, right? And that I think there's opportunities there. And so it's important to like follow things like, regulations and taxes because, it'll affect the cash that your business generates, right? Or in terms of whether it sells something where it affects the taxes to the customers or to their own business, their bottom line. So, I think that's going to be interesting to see, what other things are passed in an election year, what's brought up, what's talked about, right? I think it's going to be, the other aspect, just going back, sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but like going back to sectors, there's a ton of businesses out there that make money off of the political season, right? Like the election year. And so, even in the congressional races in 2022, I think that was like the highest amount of like ad spend, for instance, that year. That's a non-presidential year, right? And so everyone's expecting this year to be the highest for a presidential year as well, too, regardless. And I think like California, for instance, has some. I think their Senate race is up for grabs after Dianne Feinstein passed away, right? So like that's going to be a huge spend as well, too. So anyway, I think there's some opportunities in some stocks in the microcap space where you can. People, I guess, forget to some degree, how much money these companies can make during these years, because no one's looking at, 4 years over 4 years comparison, right? Everyone's looking year over year. So it's like, wow, like, you went down last year. Well, it wasn't 2020. It wasn't an election year, right? There was no one running for Congress. So I think there's some opportunities in that space that I've been looking at as well. So yeah,
Nice.
I mean, I think 2024, for me, I don't know if you've heard of the golden year before, what that means, but like, like your age, the day you were born, right? Like if you're born on the 15th, right? Your 15th year of life is your golden year, right? It's supposed to be the best year of your life. What day of the year of the month were you born on?
I'm November 16th, so
Okay, so when you turn 16, like, that's supposed to be your best year, right?
it was pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a decent year.
Okay.
But there's only 31 days. So what do we do?
Yeah, so no one,
No one has
everyone's best year of their life is before they're 31,
yeah,
right?
so like nothing about is this
It's
it?
all down. It's all downhill. After
I didn't
that.
realize that. I thought it got better. Oh man. Oh
Well. Anyway, so my birthday is my birthday's on the 24th.
Okay.
So I'm hoping 2024 will be, my second golden year of my life. So
I mean, oh my, that is hilarious, dude. Oh my, what if I did like a combined like 11 plus 16? Okay, so then 37, and I could do 2037. Maybe I'll just do that.
Whatever works, have a positive spin. I think as a, especially as a microcap investor, I think you kind of have to have a positive spin on things, right? 100%. At least I'll tell you this, as an executive, as a microcap, as any executive, like you have to be positive. You have to be, pushing the team forward, right? Totally. Like being happy, have positive outlooks, right? Because that's what you're going towards. A turnaround CEO, I think, is very different, right? Like they're the ones who are like, hey man, like we're here to like make stuff right. And so anyway, I mean, it's I would say, if you're a short seller, obviously it's a different story. But yeah, I mean, let's look for a positive 2024. Hopefully, again, like everyone's all feeling comfortable, which, to me makes you feel like, well, does that, what can cause that to change, right? Like you're always like pessimist, like somewhat optimistic, but also somewhat pessimistic as well to see like, hey, like what can turn things. But yeah, I mean, 2024, let's hope it's a good year. Let's hope, everyone, lots of jobs are created. There's lots of money in the economy, things of that sort. Lower interest rates, I think, always help everything. Like, everything becomes new around you, right? New buildings get built, new stuff gets bought, new cars get bought. Like interest rates being low, I think people forget how much of an effect that really has on the world. And personally, for me, I don't really see anything wrong with low interest rates as long as inflation isn't high. So let's hope that gets lowered as well too. And an amazing year ahead. And, let's keep it up to the decade. Like let's not stop at 24. Let's go to 2030,
I'm
2040.
cool. I'm cool with like, short term, just a good decade. That'd be nice.
Yeah.
Good year, maybe good 5 years, but I think we said it all, man. Look, I'm sure you'll be back on a couple times throughout the year to talk on, maybe there's some crazy news in microcaps that like I'll have to get your take on things. But, I think we've done a good, recap of 2023, looking ahead to 2024 and, what's exciting for you and what you're hoping to see. So, I mean, Sam, with that, where can our audience go and find more information to follow you on social media, on Twitter X or whatever, and also with Ridgewood Investments?
Yeah, you can go to our website for Ridgewood Investments, ridgewoodinvestments.com. You can email me, sam@ridgewoodinvestments.com. Twitter, I am X, I am S Namiri, at S Namiri. Yeah, I think that's, and, keep following Bobby's podcast. Hope to be here. Hopefully he invites me a few more times this year. And, hopefully I can see everyone in Vegas as well, too.
Heck yeah. No, I'm stoked to see you in Vegas. This is always fun. Sam, always a pleasure, man. We gotta go hang out, dude. We're in the same city. We haven't seen each other in a minute. So
yeah, but you moved a little bit to the outskirts.
I know.
So.
I might as well be in another state at this point. But,
yeah, I'll probably see you more in Vegas than I do in LA.
Well, good stuff, Sam. Always appreciate it. Good luck. Stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you soon. All right.
You too. Be healthy and have a prosperous 2024.
You too.
Take care.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not an offer or solicitation of an offer to buy or sell securities. SNN Network, SNN Inc., and the Planet MicroCap Podcast and the representatives are not licensed brokers, broker-dealers, market makers, investment bankers, investment advisors, analysts, or underwriters. We do not recommend any companies discussed. We may buy and sell securities in any company mentioned and may profit in the event those securities rise in value. We recommend you consult with a professional investment advisor, broker, or legal counsel before purchasing or selling any securities referenced in this podcast.